Welcome to the latest edition and the newest edition of the Shukri Wrights Podcast with your host, Shukri Wrights. It's been a while since I've done this, probably since March, but now is the time to start a new season, new episodes, and I'm excited to have Pat Boyle of WFAN and CBS Sports Radio joining the podcast. Pat, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm doing well, Shukri. I appreciate you having me, man.
Oh, always. Let's start with, first and foremost, the current scene in New York. And the big story right now, Aaron Judge, the home run chase, trying to break Roger Maris's single season American League record of 61 home runs. And like the Yankees now, they have already secured a first round bye. They won't play into the division series. And they also have secured the American League East yesterday as well. And Pat, when you look at this Yankee team, considering how they started and the struggles that they had in the second half, what are your overall thoughts on the team as they get ready for the postseason, and as well as Aaron Judge's home run chase?
Yeah, well, I think right now that's what's sweeping not only New York, but I think for a lot of baseball fans around the country, it's Judge's chase for 61, right? And now, this is going on 6 games without a home run. I think it actually is 7 now since Tuesday night. And this is I think this is the second longest stretch of the year without him for a home run. So I get it now. Everyone, the question on the fandom New York for a lot of baseball fans is, is Judge feeling the pressure?
Yeah.
Is he not going to be able to do it? Look, Aaron Judge hasn't felt an ounce of pressure all year long. Since he made the decision to gamble on himself when he turned down the Yankees contract extension of $218 million before the year started. And he has since gone on to be in pole position to win the American League Triple Crown. He has 60 home runs. The guy has spit in the face of pressure all year long. And he now has, I believe it's 14 walks in these last 7 games that he has not hit a home run. So he's not seeing a lot of pitches in the zone. Boston wasn't throwing him a lot to hit, even though they said they were going right after him. And Toronto has surely not given him much to hit. He walked 4 times in that game on Tuesday night. So, it's pretty obvious that neither of the AL East rivals of the Yankees want to be the ones that give Aaron Judge, the chance for history.
Oh, yeah.
He's not having bad at-bats. He's having fantastic at-bats. He's still getting base hits. He's getting doubles, but he's taking his walks when he needs to. So I think it's only a matter of time here. And that means for me, by the end of the week, that he will tie and break Maris's record. I think he'll have 61 and 62 at the latest by the end of the game Sunday against the Baltimore Orioles. But this record for me was never really in doubt. Once he hit the 40s and then especially in the 50s, and it's still not now. And now, when you look at this Yankees team going into the season, there was a lot of doubt, right? I know a lot of people said this might be the 4th best team in the American League East.
I was one of them.
And I don't blame you. I don't blame you, man. I was too. I was very down on the Yankees going into the season because they had a chance to make some splash signings in free agency. And instead, it seemed like the biggest moves were to make the trades for Josh Donaldson and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, and not necessarily bring in a whole lot of pitching as well. But, as they say, in Cashman you trust. And for the most part this year, the Yankees were on pace to break the Mariners' record for wins in a season. They hit that swoon in August. A lot of people then started freaking out again and said, this is the team they've always been this year. And every time I filled in on the fan, a dozen or so times this summer, I found myself being the one to tell everybody, hold on. There's got to be some truth and semblance to the first 3 months that this team, the performance they had. So I was like, they're going to win the AL East. I got a little nervous because I was on, the division lead was 9, then it was 7. And the whole time I'm saying, relax. And then it got down to 4. And I was starting to feel the fire under my seat. I had people tweeting at me, calling me when I was hosting, saying, "You're nuts. You're a Yankees apologist." They ended up getting it done, man. They are a great team. They're a solid team. But going into the postseason, there are obviously legitimate concerns for them, which I'm sure we'll talk about here.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because being from New York, I understand the mindset of Yankee fans when it comes to the panic, if you will. You have a big lead and then it all of a sudden just shrinks. It happened in 1996, funny enough, because back then the Yankees, they had a large lead throughout that entire summer of 96. They get to September, they struggle mightily during that final month. And we all remember, like, no, like what happened. And they go on the run in October. They won the World Series and everything else. So, like, I just think that is interesting because when everything is smooth sailing, everything looks and seems as if that, well, there's no reason to worry. Like, and then the moment you finally face adversity, and I've been one that have believed that this is a long season, 162 games. It's not like the NFL, like where you have 18 weeks and 17 games. Like, you're going to go through slumps. The Yankees didn't go for a slump for more than half the season. And then when they finally did, it was as if like, oh my gosh, the world is ending. Like the New York press, like, oh my gosh, like what's wrong with the Yankees? Yankees got to do something at the trade deadline. But they seem like they finally right the ship. And they're playing great baseball in the month of September, which is a terrific sign going into October. So, Pat, if you had to pick two reasons why the Yankees have been able to figure out what had been plaguing them during the month of October, what are those two reasons in your mind that you believe the Yankees have been able to turn around?
I think bringing up some of the young guys, as Waldo Cabrera, I think the biggest thing was the offense. There was a time when they started that slump where they weren't playing complimentary baseball. Some nights the offense would put up 7-8 runs and they couldn't get a good start out of their pitching. Other times it was the bullpen, and then other days it was the offense. And then it turned when things got really ugly in the middle of August, or beginning to middle of August. It was basically solely the offense. They could not score runs.
Yeah.
When they went through a stretch where they were playing Seattle, getting shut out, playing St. Louis, getting shut out, couldn't score against Tampa Bay, which, it seems like that was a recurring theme over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And then, calling up Oswaldo Cabrera, I thought was a huge lift for them. Oswald Peraza, even though he doesn't play a whole lot, and I know a lot of Yankees fans, for some reason, have a severe disdain for Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, as if mm-hmm. when he was brought in, he was a guy that you were thinking was going to hit 300. Like, he's putting up the exact numbers he's put up for most of his career.
Oh, yeah.
But even, and Florial, came up for a couple of games and got sent back down. Miggy, who's now on the Pirates. But I think just, mixing things up, and especially once Carpenter got hurt and then Benintendi got hurt and Rizzo was dealing with the back issues, you just needed some kind of spark. And, that can get thrown around a lot and sound cliched, but it's the truth. You
Sure.
said it. It's a long season, man, 162 games. Things can get stale. And I figured if nothing else, the Yankees were simply going to play themselves out of that no matter what. And I think a lot of that had to do with that 2-game series against the Mets at home, where where they were playing so bad, the Mets had swept them at Citi Field, and everybody was like, oh, the Mets are going to crush them again. It was Scherzer, I think, and DeGrom back to back.
Yeah.
Or it was supposed to be DeGrom. And then the Yankees woke up, they sweep the Mets, they got on a little bit of a run, dipped back down a little bit, but then, really steadied the ship here. So I think it was, just about getting back to them, being able to drive guys in, being able to move runners over, situational hitting, which that severely lacked for them in August. That picked back up. And then they just, they started getting better pitching out of the bullpen, because Clay Holmes went down the tubes. He still really hasn't recovered. I think that's the other biggest concern is who's going to be the closer, who's going to be able to.
It cannot be Chapman, for love of God, please.
I'm worried about Chapman even being on the postseason roster, man. And I never thought I'd be saying that, but no. So the offense picking back up was one, and also getting some good, solid pitching out of the bullpen was the second biggest thing that allowed them to turn it back around.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think that in terms of the ninth inning, if Clay Holmes can get back to being healthy at some point, that would be huge. But I'm not entirely convinced that even by the time they start the division series on October the 11th, that Clay Holmes will be healthy. And I do not want to see Chapman anywhere near the ninth inning. Like, I frankly don't. And the reason is very simple, because I've personally lost hope in Chapman. Ever since that he lost his closer role, he has not been the same guy. And for me, the series that I point to was the series that I was at here in Boston, the 4-game series. I believe it was back in July against the Red Sox. And I look back at that time and I say, this guy doesn't look like he's the same Chapman that we knew for the previous 3 or 4 seasons. And now, as we get ready to go to October, we talk about the bullpen. Now, the rotation, I think, has some interesting question marks. In your mind, Pat, who do you think could be the biggest wild card for the Yankees in terms of the starting rotation come the postseason, and why?
Well, I mean, in terms of a wild card, I'll give you that answer in just a second. But
Sure.
I'll tell you, they need Garrett Cole to step up and finally be the ace they paid him to be. He seems like he gives up a big home run now every single start. It comes at the worst time. He got shelled last year in the wild card game against Boston. But for the most part, October, when he was with Houston, he was phenomenal in October. He was phenomenal in the postseason. He certainly has not, really hit his stride. I know he leads the baseball in strikeouts, but it's the home runs that he continues to give up seemingly at the worst time.
Yeah.
I'll give him my answer again for a wild card, but they need Garrett Cole to be the ace, because if you can't win game one in the ALDS, if Cole doesn't pitch well, I still think the Yankees are good enough. If it looks like they're going to play Seattle or if they're going to play Cleveland, I still think they're good enough. They're deep enough to beat either of those teams. But then if you go up a game one if they play Houston in the ALCS,
oh boy,
you can't outduel Verlander. It's going to be a quick series, and they're going to be going home again. So they need Cole to step up in October. In terms of a wild card, I would assume most Yankee fans have a lot of confidence in Nestor Cortez that he is going to pitch as well as he has most of the season. So I'm not going to say him. For the wild card, I would say it's the guy that pitched on Tuesday night and pitched excellent. And that's Jameson Taillon. I think if JMO can pitch the way he did against Toronto's lineup, where he was not only had swing and miss stuff, he was efficient, he was economical. I mean, he pitched into the 8th inning. If he's getting ahead of guys, we know since he came here how great JMO's stuff is. And I think he could be the guy that could be the big X factor where, if it's game 6, game 7, and Cole and Nestor have already pitched twice, Andy Pettitte was the game 7 guy for the Yankees. I think this year it could be Jameson Taillon who maybe steps into that role and proves out to be, a big hero for them in October.
And that's something that I believe that would be one of the most interesting storylines to find the Yankees is Taillon. Like, can he be that guy in a rotation that will most likely feature? It'll definitely have Cole, but behind Cole, who is your number 2 or number 3 or possibly number 4 starter if you get to the ALCS? I'm thinking it's got to be Cortez. It's got to be Taillon. Severino, perhaps. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think for sure 1, 2, 3 right now is Cole, Nestor, and JMO. And then Sevy would probably be 4. That being said, I don't know how much length they expect out of Sevy come October. His last 3 starts, he has failed to pitch more than 5 innings.
Yeah.
He got hit hard against Cincinnati in his last start. That was back in July. And now since he's came back, you knew he was only going to have a couple of starts. Pitched against Pittsburgh, pitched against Toronto. Didn't look extremely sharp in either of them. So he's going to go into the postseason, I would say probably with one more start. He's going to probably pitch again this upcoming weekend against Baltimore. And that's it. 3 starts getting set for October. Unless it goes 7 shutout against the Orioles on Friday or Saturday, I don't know what you really can expect out of Sevy. And I don't think Boone, can trust to put him in that top 3 rotation. So I think for sure it's Cole, Nestor, JMO, 1, 2, 3. Sevy as the number 4 if he's healthy going into, the middle of October. Because again, like you said, they're going to have basically a week off.
Yeah.
So if Severino makes his last start against Baltimore this weekend, he's going to have essentially 2 weeks before he makes his postseason start. After that, I doubt they're going to go 5 deep. They'll probably go back to Cole for what would be game 5 or, the 5th turn in the rotation. Because, I mean, let's face it, who knows if Frankie Montas is even going to pitch right now in October.
Great point.
And that goes back to the trade deadline. I at the time, it seemed like it was a lot to give up for Luis Castillo, but he has been basically worth every penny for Seattle. And if the Yankees have to play them and they got to face Luis Castillo again, everybody's going to look back at the end of July and say, well, you know what? Maybe you should have given up the prospects for him, because for a while now, the concern and the complaints for Yankee fans is with not only the Steinbrenners, with Hal not spending as much money as he probably should be, not nearly enough, but it's also with Cashman, not going after the big free agents and also wanting to hold on to prospects and holding on to them too long. I mean, we saw what happened with Gary. They could have traded him a couple of years ago. They could have sold high on him. They probably could have sold high on Glaber. They're still sticking it out with Glaber. We'll see if he can ever become the hitter he was, where he had almost 40 home runs. But, I think that rotation is going to be 4 deep, and they're going to be depending on guys like Clark Schmidt coming out of the bullpen for long relief spots if needed.
across town, the Mets are a team that a lot of people in baseball are really intrigued by, and for great reason. You can make an argument that they have the best 1-2 punch in baseball with Scherzer and DeGrom. I personally think they do. And as we get ready to go into October, right now the Mets can't even think that far ahead because they are in a sudden death pennant race with the Atlanta Braves, the defending World Series champion Atlanta Braves. And this is a team that's not going away. And they have been tooth and nail with this team for a better part of the last month and a half. So if you're the New York Mets and you're Buck Showalter and you're looking at the Mets as they get ready for the postseason, what is one key that you look at in which that the Mets need to capitalize on in order to stave off the Atlanta Braves to win the division and not have to play in the wild card round?
They're going to need to take 2 out of 3 from them this weekend in Atlanta. Right?
Oh,
They
yeah.
lost on Tuesday night to Miami. They gave up the 1-game lead. They do hold the season series. As long as they don't get swept by Atlanta, the Mets and the Braves can finish with the same record. The Mets will have the tiebreaker. There's no longer a game 163. They would be the division champs. So they have to finish at worst with the same record as Atlanta. But again, they're going to have 3 games set with them this weekend. Hurricane Ian coming in off the coast is already starting to crush Florida.
Yeah.
You know, they're planning on playing the games as scheduled. I saw earlier on Wednesday, the Mets were going to, they offered basically to move up the game against the Marlins and then play Thursday against Atlanta. The Braves declined, which, and I know a lot of Mets fans will be pissed at, but the Braves don't have to accommodate the Mets. So as of now, those games are still scheduled Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's going to determine the division. If the Mets win the series, if they take 2 out of 3, you can essentially kiss the division goodbye if you're Atlanta, because then the Mets finish up with the Nats. If Atlanta wins that series and everything else is withstanding, and then the Braves have a 1-game lead, well, then the Mets will need to hope that Atlanta, loses 1, if not 2, of their final games, and the Mets will have to sweep the Nationals. So it's always been right in front of the Mets. It's still right in front of them. That division lead went up to 10, back to a half a game, back up to 7. Now it's tied again. They have set themselves up where it's going to be Bassett, DeGrom, and Max Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So you really can't ask for anything else. And they've got to go out there. They've got to deliver, especially DeGrom, who's coming off of one of the worst starts of his career against the worst offense in baseball in the A's. For the Mets, they've got to outduel, Wright, Morton, and I believe it's Elder who's pitching the other game for the Braves, the young guy.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's it, man. This division, it seemed like it was going to come down to the wire the entire year, and it's going to come down to their final 3 games against each other. The Mets will have to rely on the starting pitching.
How much fun are you having right now as a baseball fan in New York? Because I was telling this to someone not long ago that even though I no longer live in New York, live in Boston now, I've been living here for the last 5.5 years, I can't remember a time where it just felt like there could possibly be a Subway World Series if the stars align right for both teams for the first time since 2000. Not even 2006, I felt this way. But with the way that the Mets have gone, and especially how September has played both in their favor and as well as against them, I think that this is a Mets team that has shown a lot of resolve in their first year under Buck Showalter. We knew going into the season that Buck Showalter was going to be one of the biggest difference makers, having an experienced manager who's managed in New York before, but across town with the Yankees in the 90s, but knows how to handle the media, knows how to handle the pressure and whatnot. How much fun is it to be able to cover both teams, the Yankees and the Mets, whom they both have legitimate World Series aspirations?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a blast. It's been a blast, man. I mean, I'm not a fan of either team. Technically speaking, I am a Cubs fan. I know, how does that happen?
Breaking my heart.
Yeah. Long story short, I'm a big Notre Dame football fan, above anything else. Pathetic year they're having aside, but basically when I was 12 and I figured that's like the tipping point between, do you choose your dad or your brother or whoever else's teams, or do you forge your own path? I was like, well, the Cubs just drafted Jeff Samardzija, who played.
I remember. Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? I love the Cubs. I don't feel a strong allegiance toward my dad's team, the Yankees. They've always been the evil empire. So I was like, you know what? It's obviously not jumping on the bandwagon. They're my dad's favorite team, but so anyway, that's why I'm a Cubs fan. So having a neutral standpoint, not being a fan of the Yankees or the Mets, I think it's been awesome. I say this is the best shot I think we'll have, for either of these teams in their championship windows to see the Subway Series, World Series. And not being a fan of either team, I say you should be praying that you get a Subway Series, World Series.
Yes.
I know a lot of Mets fans don't want it. I feel like Yankee fans probably would because you have history on your side.
Yeah.
But I think the Mets are, would be better aligned to win a championship in October than the Yankees are. So I think it's more so a lot of pain and suffering in the past for Mets fans that they don't want one. But it would be a hell of a 2 weeks if those two teams meet once again. The city would be electric. The WFAN airwaves would be unbelievable.
Yeah.
I think everybody else outside of New York probably wouldn't give a damn because it's like, oh, great, both teams from New York made it. But you know from yourself growing up in New York, it would be unbelievable. And I hope we do get it.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like, as you were saying that, I was thinking about, I was in fourth grade in 2000 when we had the Yankees and Mets World Series. And I vividly remember still, even 22 years later, just how electric New York was. Like there was just nothing else mattered for that week and a half. It really was like your friends were either a Yankee fan or a Mets fan. And it was baseball war, if you will. But, Pat, as I think about this, what makes this different now is social media. No question, because if you think about it, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, 2000, we didn't have Twitter or Facebook or like Instagram or even TikTok. The social media wasn't even a thing. The only social media we had in 2000 was AOL, and you were praying that you weren't talking to some random stranger on the internet back then with dial-up. But I digress. but now, with social media being a major force in society and the world at large today, if the Yankees and the Mets were to meet in the World Series come late October, around a month from now, how much bigger do you think it could potentially be than it was in 2000, given 2000 was pretty monumental?
I think it would be huge. I think it would be huge. I think as a whole, unfortunately, baseball, I think is not what it used to be in terms of fan outreach. And I don't think you have to, that's like speaking the obvious here. I think you and I and most fans of baseball know that. But obviously, I think in New York on the Fan, where the Giants and the Jets could have started the season both 3-0, Yankees and the Mets are still going to rule. It's still going to be the number one topic. So New York's always been a baseball town. And if you get these two teams meeting now with the power of Twitter, with the power of Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, every element of social media, I mean, dude, it's going to be blowing up every single night when they play. And Yankee Stadium, goes without saying, is going to be packed.
Exactly.
City Field is going to be packed because you're going to have Yankee fans, if nothing else. The Mets are in a pennant and a division race right now, and they're having a lot of trouble selling out Citi Field. They're playing a lot of sub 500 teams coming down the stretch, but still, at the same point, you and I both know that Yankee Stadium will always have every single seat filled in October. It's kind of hard to describe. It's kind of hard to grasp, I think, just how big Subway Series, World Series would be on social media. Let alone outside of it.
And what's amazing about this is that when I think about just how big it would be now, is the kids who are, let's say, 21, 22 years old, 23, they have no conception of or perception of what 2000 was like at all.
Yeah.
It was like, wait, what was I like? Oh, let me tell you. But switching from baseball to your story, because I am interested in your story and your journey. You grew up in the tri-state and you work currently for WFAN. Take me through your childhood and what influences did you have? Did you have a particular favorite radio host that influenced you into getting into sports radio and consequently enough play-by-play as you do for LIU, my alma mater?
Yeah, so I think it just, came down to the relationship I had with my dad and, him driving me to baseball practice, any kind of practice I had or games or just, driving, anywhere to go get food or hang out. two things were on the radio. It was either the Fan, it was either WFAN, or it was Bruce Springsteen. So
Yep.
anytime it was WFAN, Mike and the Mad Dog was like the soundtrack of my childhood. Hearing, two legends go at it day after day. There was no better radio theater than listening to that. So, having the relationship with my dad and him loving WFAN and sports talk radio and being a big New York sports fan and hearing Mike and Chris, every single time I was in the car with my dad, that's what inspired me, my love for sports and sports talk radio, and just debating, right? What with my friends, like, oh, this team sucks, this team's better. The Yankees are going to win the World Series this year, so on and so forth. So that was a big inspiration for me growing up, and always too. I think, when I would watch games when I was a teenager, going into middle school and going through high school, I always loved knowing who was calling the game. Whether it was like Ian Eagle, Kevin Harlan, Jim Nance, Joe Buck, like those are guys I grew up watching. The biggest games were always called by those guys. And I always loved listening to hear their call on a big play, a touchdown, a home run. And that's kind of what got me into doing play-by-play, which, like you said, I do for LIU, I do for Rutgers. Once I went to college, I played baseball at Drew, which is a D3 school in North Jersey. But once I was done playing, and when you only throw 82 miles an hour, your days are limited in terms of playing. I always knew I wanted to get in the booth and talk about sports. So that's what led me to wanting to work at the Fan and also do play-by-play.
When you first began to do play-by-play, like what was it about it that enamored you with the love of calling live sports action?
Yeah, I would say just the emotion, right? For every reason why we love watching sports, the big plays, the emotions of it, being able to, describe those feelings both on radio where people can't see it and you have to describe the five senses, what's going on, the noise in the crowd, the noise in a stadium, painting a picture for somebody and being able to paint the moment so that the only way that they can the only way they know what's going on is by listening to what you're saying. To me, there was always a special art and a special element that I was drawn to with that. If I can get paid to watch and call games, I think that would be a pretty sweet career. So I always knew that I wanted to do something that I loved. I never wanted to work a normal, boring 9-to-5 job. So being able to watch games and describe what's going on to people watching at home, for me, I don't know, it was just second nature.
When you reflect on your journey and your path and how it's led you to where you are now, what was the process like for you? I want to go specifically talk about your process. What was the process like for you as you begun to hone your craft and to work on getting better at what you do, both on like radio and doing play-by-play, but especially in sports radio, in which that it's a grind. It's about getting repetitions, about continuing to get better and finding your voice and knowing how to deliver your thoughts and your opinions on subject matter that matter on that particular given day. So walk me through that process. What was it like for you?
Yeah, I think in both play-by-play and with sports talk radio, I think a lot of it for me is just process of osmosis. Seeing and hearing how others that I admire and aspire to be like, seeing and hearing the way they do it, and then being able to work at the Fan and see the way some of the great sports talk radio hosts and how they go about their process and kind of to pick their brain and have that opportunity to do that since I'm already working there. Was a huge thing for me. And just things you pick up on, the way hosts go to break, the way hosts come back from break, the way that they make their points. To me, learning through osmosis was always number one. Number two, like you said, is always about getting the reps. So I only started getting on the air at the Fan just over a year ago. So it was doing my own podcast, pretending I was on the Fan in the car, during commercial breaks, when Steve Summers would be on at night, when I'd be driving, turning down muting the radio in between breaks and doing my own segment, things like that, listening back to your podcast, listening back to your tapes. And then also, even before I started working at Fan, using LinkedIn, networking with people, reaching out, saying, hey, like I'm aspiring to be in sports talk radio. I'm aspiring to be in play-by-play. Here's some of my stuff. If you could take a listen and you have any feedback, let me know. I think that's a huge thing, both in in our industry, sports talk and play-by-play, is opening up doors for yourself. Because I think at the end of the day, if you're in this career, it's tough, man. It's like 1 in a million, right? It's hard. So millions of people want to do it. Then thousands of people know what it takes to work hard to get there. And even then, out of those thousands, only a select few get the opportunity to do it on a pretty big stage and to have a pretty big reach and audience. So you got to work your ass off, one, obviously. And I knew that. And I think my parents kind of instilled, work ethic in me from a young age, working hard, networking, reaching out to people. But like I said, it's 1 out of a couple of thousand that are going to make it. So I think at the end of the day, you want to help people that are in this industry, and you want to help others around you. So, I've already started to do that with some younger college kids, and I've been lucky that, other people have reached out and have extended their hand to help me.
Absolutely. And I think that's so beautiful, because I can't emphasize enough just how important it is to not be afraid to give back, or even like help others as you even continue to grow in your journey. And it's really wonderful to hear that, like that your parents have had such a big hand in cultivating the work ethic to constantly want to get better and improve, and to put yourself out there. Because a lot of people, which surprised me when I first heard this, a lot of people are afraid to put themselves out there. And it's like, you can't be. This is not the business or the industry to be shy. Like, you have to be willing to put yourself out there, to be told no, or like, hey, we gave the opportunity to someone else, and to keep going at it. And I think that in itself is huge. Yeah,
you can't be scared of rejection, man. It's, some people spend 20 years of their career before they even get their big break. Yep. And I know that's scary for a lot of young people to hear that, but that's the truth. And, when you look back, like when I look back even 5 years ago, when I first graduated college to where I am now, I'm amazed by it. And then you say, okay, well, maybe if I'm not going to have a full-time show for another 5-10 years, like that's scary, but it's about the process, man. It's about getting better. And if you're working hard and you're able to do, and this is what you love to do, if you're somebody that loves talking about sports, if you love play-by-play, then, you find those side jobs that you can do to kind of make ends work, that, where you're able to continue to do what you love and hone your craft.
Absolutely. Last question. You grew up in Jersey, right?
Yes. Yeah. Central Jersey, South Plainfield, right next to Edison.
Oh, yeah. I went to high school in Lawrence Township, in Mercer County. If you had to pick between two sandwiches, between the pork roll or the chopped cheese, which one would you pick, and why?
Pork roll. And I'm glad you called it pork roll. It's not Taylor. So pork roll, man, pork roll, egg and cheese. That's a staple. That is like, I have a pork roll, egg and cheese at least once a week. Probably should be cutting that down to less, but man, that is the king of breakfast sandwiches. And you'll never be able to change my mind on that.
My pleasure. It's my pleasure to have you on the podcast, Pat. Thank you seriously so much for coming on the podcast. It's been my pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, Shukri, appreciate it, man. Good luck the rest of the way, and definitely stay in touch, and happy to come on.
Absolutely. My pleasure.